I just replayed Sonic Frontiers a week ago, ever since the definitive version came out, and I have a lot of thoughts on the game. Thankfully, a lot of them are positive. I haven't played this game since launch, and if there's one thing I can say right now, I do like this game. It's one of my favorite 3D Sonic games, but it also has a shit ton, and I mean a shit ton of problems. It is probably the most locked in 7 out of 10 I have ever played. But with that being said, I want to talk about like some of the pros, some of the cons, and what I think a future 3D Sonic game could take from this, because I think, if nothing else, Frontiers is a beautiful blueprint. It is the perfect like set of guidelines, and it adapts a lot of like the OG 3D Sonic templates and like game design philosophies into like a much more modern open world setting. But first I want to talk about like the pros of the game. If there's one thing I can absolutely give this game, it is that it controls better than almost every other 3D Sonic game I have played. You know, there's an argument to be made that something like Sonic Adventure might feel a little more responsive, or Sonic Generations might feel a little more kinetic with stuff like the drift. But I really do think that like Frontiers, especially when you're out in the open world, and have customized the controls, because I will say that like the original base controls are not great, but once you can tweak them a little, fine tune them, it's incredibly fun. You have such a diverse moveset that it makes Sonic, above all else, fun to control. And that hasn't really been something I could say about Sonic games since like maybe the classic series, all the way back then. I really do think this is peak Sonic control. Not to mention, I think the environments, while bland looking, which we'll go into that later, are very spacious, and I think personally well designed. I can understand that they can feel repetitive at times and very blocky and piecemeal, I guess. You know, you see all these like rails in the sky, all these blocks and platforms floating around, but I do think it kind of works. It all kind of clicks together, and it makes my brain go into like some sort of flow state where I'm thinking about nothing else but going fast and just tricking. And I love the fact that like your movement is actually incentivized with the skill tree system. It is so funny that like Nintendo took a skill tree and put it into Donkey Kong Bonanza a year or two after Sonic Frontiers, because I think Frontiers nailed the idea of putting a skill tree in a platformer. I really do think it's a fantastic example of like a natural upgrade system. And my hot take is that I like the combat. I don't love it. There's definitely an argument to be made that it's a little too simplistic, but I like the idea that it flows relatively pretty smoothly, especially with a move like the side loop. Like, that is integrated into the core gameplay loop shockingly well. I also like the structure. I like the fact that there are 5 big islands. Well, 3 big islands and 2 half islands. And then you've got all these like cyberspace levels dotted around. I thought this would be super lame, and I thought I would hate the cyberspace levels, and I'll admit that they're not great 3D Sonic levels on their own, but as these like additive pieces of like more linear gameplay, I think they work weirdly well. It strikes this nice balance between like open, fuck around and do whatever you want, and like clean, concise, precise design. Concise and precise, that was a weird combination of words, but yeah. Do I wish that there were more like kinetic and fun 3D Sonic levels, you know, on the level of something like Generations or even Adventure? Totally. I can totally see an argument for that, but I like the fact that these cyberspace levels are kind of like blink and you miss it. But I think the whole game is unfortunately hampered by this like duct tape build. That's what I'm gonna call it. It feels like the game is made with duct tape and toothpicks. It really does seem like the engine, the Hedgehog engine 2, wasn't designed for an open world game, and it leads to a whole host of cons. Pretty much all my problems with the game are built in the fact that like the engine, the framework was not designed to support an open world game, and so you feel it. You see the pop-in, you see the shitty looking grass, you see the terrible lighting. Honestly, as a whole, this might be one of the ugliest games that I have ever liked in my life. I just think something about Sonic Frontiers feels a lot more cheap than stylized, and it has a trickle-down effect to the story. I didn't mention the story at all during the pros section, and that's because for as much as like the story might acknowledge past events and feel like a more emotional, grounded retelling of like the Sonic story, it's presented in the ugliest, most bland, static way. It'll literally be like, you'll have a cutscene with Sonic, and he sounds 45. Can I just say, like, the voice acting really, I don't know what the direction was, but it was the wrong direction. They need to hop in the other way, because Sonic will just be there like, yeah, I'll save my friends, and yeah, I'll totally be there. Like, he looks like a robot the entire time with these fucking pre-rendered animations. He'll randomly do like some really fluid action pose, and it'll totally juxtapose it so it still looks bad. And what it does is it makes the narrative feel a lot less like cohesive. I think that's the right word. I think presentation-wise, Frontiers lacks a lot, which is kind of crazy considering the whole appeal of Sonic was in its presentation, was in the fact that like you had this very cool kinetic looking game that ran really well on the Sega Genesis. There's also definitely some like weird balance issue in terms of like the 2D 3D split. If you don't know, a lot of like the modern 3D Sonic games are kind of split into 2D 3D sections. I'm assuming just because the 2D ones are easier to design. And what that does is like it fragments the gameplay in a way that I don't think really works and doesn't really add to that flow state. And the worst example of this is the third island, the volcano one, Ares, I believe it's what's called. Terribly designed island. It might be it's one of these fucking names. Terribly designed. Awful. You are constantly railroaded into these weird 2D sections. You have, oh my god, you have the worst attempt at gameplay variety I have ever seen in a AAA platformer. You have the shitty pinball, you've got all these like weird stupid mini games. That island is a mess, and it does put a hamper on what is like otherwise a decently fun game. You know what else puts a hamper on it? The DLC. Guys, I can't shit on it too hard because the DLC was free, but oh my god, it's so lame and cheap and half-assed. It is practically like one step below something like Getting Over It. It is so trial and error, and if you don't play the game on like an easy mode, you are gonna have the worst time ever. And then it immediately follows that up with a combat gauntlet, and it's like, guys, I don't want to do all that. I wanted to play as Tails and Knuckles and Amy, and this is not what I wanted. Okay, this is flat out not what I wanted. But the fact that they even messed around with multiple characters shows that that's something in their minds. And that brings me to what I'd like to see in a Sonic Frontiers 2. Because we've already kind of seen like a Frontiers 1.5. We had Sonic X Shadow Generations come out, I believe in like 2023, and it was bar none my game of that year. Or whatever year it might have been 2024. It was 2024, wasn't it? Yeah, it was bar none my game of the year. And that's crazy considering there was a Zelda game that year. But man, something about the upgrade system in that game, the levels are way more spacious and wonderfully designed. You can actually replay them, which is something I don't really think cyberspace levels, for as much as I was glazing them, I don't think they do a great job of replayability. I think the open world, while a lot more like closed off and restrictive, and your movement is definitely a little more restricted, it's so much more designed. The minigames feel a lot more tied to your inherent abilities as Shadow in that case. And I think a Frontiers 2 with like the advanced movement options and the combat of Frontiers mixed with like the precise design and the incredible levels in Shadow Generations, if they just married each other and then kissed a little, I think they can make a banger game. If you made like 5 islands that were all the size of Shadow Generations hub world, this could be like one of the best Sonic games ever made. And you can designate each of those islands to a character, or you could make each island have like specific character related challenges. That might err on the side of like a Donkey Kong 64, which is why I'm not fully adhering to that gameplay idea, but it could be interesting. I just think they're so close to like a banger Sonic game. I am so excited to see what the future of the franchise has, because I can see something beautiful being made out of it. And there's been so many missteps over the years, you know. I think it's just time that we get like a solid concrete win. Not a game that will serve as a good foundation for the next game in the series, or not a game that feels like a demo. A real, actual 10+ hour Sonic game with a nice campaign and a perfect balance between like the open world shenanigans and the linear, more precisely designed levels. And then we'll have a banger on our hands. So yeah, with that being said, do you like Frontiers? Did you like Shadow Gens? Do you prefer this like amalgamation of the boost and open world style, or would you just straight up want like an Adventure 3? Because I can understand the argument for that too. Adventure is actually one of my favorite 3D Sonic games. Didn't even mention that at all in this, but just tell me what you think. All right, bye-bye.